Thank you to the center for this opportunity. Thank you to Sudhir sir for calling me. Thank you to Rupesh and Manish also for thinking I am worthy of sitting here. Let me start by grounding this spirit of resistance that we are so familiar with in this campus, that we are usually enamored by any protest, mobilization and resistance. I feel that analyzing all movements from a critical lens is important because we are usually enamored by any reference to the spirit of resistance, but we must keep in mind that all movements and all mobilization on the streets in themselves and in entirety may not strengthen democratic progressive values. We should look at the farmers' movement and all movements from this perspective. I am going to make my comments under three headings. The first one is what is the contribution of the book. The book offers great detailing and in-depth account of the farmers' protest and its seamless integration with concepts like state, capitalism, democracy with examples of protest movements from across the globe is very important. The contextual uniqueness of this movement both in space and temporal terms has been laid out well, pretty early and clearly in the book. Another significant contribution is the panopticon view that the book has approached the subject with. While acknowledging works on themes like farmers' movements, agrarian crisis and resistance, this book charts its own path by analyzing the recent farmers' movement into a political and policy framework combined and not treating these two categories as distant from each other. The second category that I have laid out is what's interesting in the book. New categories of explanation that are coming out. Firstly, the category of farmer peasantry and not farmer and peasantry. And how it is different from the traditional separation of farmer and peasantry is quite unique. It would be good if the author could elaborate on this category, especially how it has taken shape ever since the introduction of neoliberal reforms in India. Secondly, the author argues that this farmers' protest come movement does not fit into conventional categories of old and new social movement theory. The author describes this movement as a hybrid phenomena, which includes multiplicities of interests and groups and how they were integrated to form some sort of a whole. I would like the author to elaborate on this category if possible, considering the multiple sectional interests involved rarely ever form an alliance and what could be the reasons behind it. The last section, the last heading that I have sort of found my comments under is what could have been interesting. It's basically some sort of the reader feels hanging at certain points and hence I think it would have been better if the author had gone the extra mile. The first point in this heading would be the book argues that this protest is part of making of a larger social movement in contemporary India. If that is so, I think we then need to analyze multiple movements together and see what kind of response it evoked from these farmers protesters. For example, consider the anti-CAA protest that had happened just before COVID, the restless protest, the anti-agri protest, etc. Any larger social movement would have to be premised on humanist solidarity and manufactured operational consensus. I am not sure if the farmers' movement and the people organizations involved have fully lived up to this message. Recently, a prominent leader of the farmers' movement made apprehensive remarks against the UGC equity policy, saying it will increase caste rivalries. Thus, a question arises that is there really a possibility of a larger social movement, or are we only witnessing fragmented solidarities and issue-based instantaneous movements? I think we also need a more critical look at the role of these numerous farmers' organizations on their positions on critical issues like land reforms, on the changes made to the Manrega, and what impact it will have on rural development. For instance, have these organizations ever made demands for a fixed wage for landless labor in their farms with legal protection like we have had right to work in Manrega? I am slightly at discomfort with the way these organizations talk about or bring in the question of land, which is that they challenge land acquisition for corporate interests aided by the state, but almost entirely fail to bring in the question of land reforms into their agenda, including in the movement. Further, the category of Kisan is far too easily accepted as a truism without contestations. We should interrogate as to what is the stance of this farmers' union who shape and prosper on the Kisan identity with its relation to the land as sacred entity, but does not seem to be pushing for a more equitable distribution of land, which apparently is part of every Kisan's pehchan. From another perspective, R. Ramkumar, who is mentioned in the book, in an important essay has criticized the making of the farmer identity by these farmers' organizations, particularly BKU. He argues that these apparently all-encompassing farmers' organizations based on farmer identity are open to and in fact breed communal tendencies that had a direct effect on Muzaffarnagar rights. This shows how Kisan as an identity is very fluid and susceptible to other sectional constraints such as class, caste, gender. Lastly, the book I think falls short of engaging with the nature of state in India in context of this farmers' movement. I think Pranab Bardhan's idea of the three dominant classes in India, industrial capitalists, rich farmers, and the professional class, would have essentially made the discussion in the book richer. In light of his argument that these three dominant classes put pressure on the state to secure their interests by being in coalition sometimes, while being in opposition at other times, can the withdrawal of the farm laws be read as a victory of rural elites over the other two groups in this instance? If that is so, it remains a victory of an entrenched elite nevertheless. And how sustaining is this opposition really? As Bardhan argues, these three dominant classes are often dispute with each other, but often collaborate too. I would put my head ahead of myself and argue that these three dominant classes are definitive collaborators on the issue of land reforms. Should we then see the withdrawal of the farm laws as only a momentary victory of one of these dominant class over the other two, much similar to what we had during the Bombay Plan of 1944, where the industrial capitalist class of India rallied behind the state's support to build a system of protective patronage till it becomes strong enough to unleash itself in the form of unrestrained neoliberalism in the coming decades?
Thank you.